We've always been close. It's been just the two of us for so long, leaning on each other through every challenge. Noah is 24 now, hardworking and thoughtful, always trying to support me just as much as I've supported him. It was a particularly cold evening in early winter. The heater in our house had been acting up again, and the chill crept in early. Noah came home later than usual, looking absolutely drained. He'd been pulling long shifts and studying for a certification exam, and the exhaustion showed in every line of his face. "Mom," he said with a sigh, "I think I just need to lie down for a bit. I don't feel great." I nodded, concerns stirring in me. "You can rest in my room if you want. It's warmer in there," I offered. He didn't argue, just walked in and collapsed on top of the blankets. I pulled out one of the heavier quilts from the closet and draped it over him. Then, after tidying up in the kitchen, I quietly slipped into the bed beside him. At first, everything felt ordinary, just a mother comforting her tired son, the way I had 1,000 times before. But then he shifted a little closer. I assumed it was just because he was cold. He used to do that when he was little. I didn't think much of it. His body radiated warmth, and I felt his breathing slow as he started to drift off. The silence in. The room was deep, calming almost, and I could hear both of our heartbeats as we lay there. After a while, Noah moved again, this time his arm wrapped around me gently. It wasn't abrupt or forceful, more like a habit born of years of closeness. Still, something about the moment made me freeze. I wasn't sure what I was feeling. It wasn't discomfort exactly, but it wasn't comfort either. I told myself it was just the cold, just an exhausted boy looking for rest. But then I felt the tension in the air shift. There was a heat between us that hadn't been there before. Noah's arm held me a little tighter, and though my instincts told me to shift away, I didn't move. A part of me stayed frozen, not out of fear, but confusion. The moment felt suspended in time, as though the usual boundaries between mother and son had blurred in the dim light and quiet warmth of the room. Then I felt something that made my heart race. Beneath the quilt, something firm brushed against my side. It caught me off guard, and a mix of alarm and disbelief surged in me. I tried to dismiss it. He was asleep, or nearly. Maybe he didn't even realize. I lay still, breathing shallowly, thoughts spiraling. "This will pass," I whispered silently to myself. It's just the harder it became to convince myself. Every shift of his body, every gentle movement of his fingertips on my arm seemed to draw out something inside me that I didn't know how to explain or control. I tried to focus on my breathing, to calm the swirling mix of emotion and thought. At one point, Noah stirred and lifted his head. His eyes met mine. And there was something unfamiliar in them, something soft but intense, like he was searching for reassurance or silently asking if what he was feeling was okay. My heart skipped. I forced a small smile, hoping to break the tension. But the silence between us only thickened. His hand, still on my arm, moved slightly, just a simple motion, light and almost innocent. But that tiny contact sent ripples through me. I couldn't look away from him. Every little gesture made me feel more disoriented. We didn't speak. Maybe neither of us could. The weight of unspoken thoughts seemed to fill the room more than the cold air ever had. I was scared, not of Noah, but of what I was beginning to feel. I kept telling myself, "He's your son, Rachel. He's your son." But the connection between us in that moment felt more complex, deeper, and harder to define than anything I had experienced before. And yet, I stayed. Not because I wanted to encourage something wrong, but because I didn't know what the right thing even was anymore. The longer we stayed under the quilt, the more aware I became of a strange tension hanging in the air. It wasn't just the warmth of Noah beside me. It was something deeper, something unspoken. His breathing was slow and steady, but I could feel his presence so clearly that it almost overwhelmed me. I didn't know how to explain the sensation pulsing quietly between us, only that it was there, undeniable and heavy. I wanted to break the silence, to say something light, even silly, to return us to the ordinary comfort we usually shared. But my mouth wouldn't open. The words wouldn't come. My heart was beating too fast, and my thoughts were spinning in all directions. Every time I tried to remind myself that he was my son, that we were just tired and cold and emotionally vulnerable, another part of me stayed locked in that fragile, confusing moment. Noah moved slightly, his hand resting softly on my shoulder. Now. His touch wasn't inappropriate, not directly, but it lingered. It was gentle, careful, even hesitant, like he didn't want to startle me. My breath hitched to my throat. I didn't dare move. I just kept staring at the ceiling, trying to pretend everything was fine, that nothing was happening. Then, so slowly, I almost didn't notice, his fingers brushed a stray strand of hair from my face. It was such a simple, caring gesture, and yet it sent a wave of something sharp and warm through me. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to collect myself. When I opened them, Noah was looking right at me, his eyes searching mine, filled with a vulnerability that I wasn't prepared for. I saw confusion in his gaze, yes, but also something else, something raw and fragile, and perhaps even afraid. For a moment, I didn't feel like I was looking at my son. I felt like I was looking at someone I didn't fully know, someone carrying emotions he hadn't been able to share with anyone. We stayed like that, barely breathing. Neither of us spoke, but the silence was filled with questions we were both too afraid to ask. I wanted to believe it was just the intensity of the moment, just the strange emotional haze of being so close in the cold, late at night, but the way he looked at me, like he was waiting for some kind of sign, I couldn't ignore it. Then Noah slowly pulled back, his eyes flickering down, as if realizing how close he'd been. He let out a soft, nervous laugh and rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture he always made when he was unsure or embarrassed. "Sorry, Mom," he murmured, avoiding my eyes. I didn't mean to make things weird. His words brought a strange sort of relief, like a wave washing over a shore too tense for too long. I exhaled softly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. "It's all right," I said, forcing a calmness I didn't fully feel. "We've just been alone together for so long. Maybe we're both just feeling a little lost tonight." He nodded slowly, and I could see the tiniest glimmer of relief in his expression. But something still lingered behind his eyes, something unresolved. Just then, as if the universe had decided we needed a reality check, the doorbell rang. We both flinched at the sudden sound, the spell between us breaking instantly. I sat up quickly, grateful for the interruption, even as my heart continued to pound. I padded to the front door and opened it to find Mark, our next-door neighbor. Mark had always been a helpful, easygoing guy in his early 50s. He gave me a warm smile, but there was a pause before he spoke, his eyes studying my face. "Hey, Rachel," he said kindly. "I just wanted to check if everything's okay. It's freezing out here, and I remember you saying the heater's been giving you trouble." I smiled, trying to regain my composure. "Oh, thanks, Mark. That's very kind of you. Yeah, the house is a bit chilly tonight." Mark stepped inside, offering to take a look at the heater. I nodded and let him pass, aware that Noah was standing in the hallway, watching quietly. I caught a glimpse of his face, and there was something there I didn't expect. A flicker of tension, maybe even jealousy. As Mark knelt to inspect the heater, he made small talk, asking how I was holding up, if I needed anything else. I responded politely, but my eyes kept drifting to Noah, who remained still, his gaze fixed on us. The energy in the room shifted again, uneasy and tight. Eventually, Mark stood and smiled. "Looks like things are running okay, but let me know if you need anything else." "Thank you," I said sincerely, walking him to the door. As I closed it behind him, I turned to find Noah still standing in the hallway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. He shrugged and looked away. "Yeah, just didn't expect him to come by, that's all." I wanted to say more, to ease the distance growing between us again, but he brushed past me and went straight to his room. The door closed softly behind him, and I was left alone in the hallway, the quiet, returning. Only now it wasn't comforting. It felt unfinished, loaded. I returned to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything. The look in his eyes, the nearness, the way Mark's visit had shifted the energy in an instant. I knew things had changed, but I wasn't sure what they had changed into. I stayed in my room for a while, the silence thick and unyielding, wrapping around me like a fog I couldn't escape. The events of the evening wouldn't leave my mind. Noah's closeness, the look in his eyes, the way he had pulled away with that quiet, nervous apology, and then Mark's sudden appearance, as if life itself had tried to snap us back to reality. I could still feel Noah's presence beside me. Even though he had left the room, his voice, his touch, the way he had brushed that strand of hair from my face, it all echoed in my thoughts. I wasn't sure what any of it meant, or if it meant anything at all. Maybe we were just both tired. Maybe emotions had gotten tangled up in a moment of vulnerability, but I couldn't deny that something had shifted. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. "Come in," I said quietly. The door creaked open, and there was Noah. He stepped in slowly, not meeting my eyes at first. He walked over and sat next to me on the bed, hands clasped tightly in his lap. We sat in silence, the air between us heavy again, not with the same electricity as before, but with something just as real. Uncertainty. "Mom?" he started, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry if things felt strange earlier. I didn't mean for it to get confusing." I looked over at him, seeing the tension in his jaw, the uncertainty in his eyes. He looked like he was carrying the weight of something he didn't know how to name. "It's okay," I said softly, placing my hand over his. Maybe we both got a little caught up in the moment. It's been just us for so long, and sometimes that closeness, it can get confusing." He nodded slowly, but then looked up at me with an expression that made my heart tighten. But it felt different. He said, barely audible, "I don't know why. I've never felt that way before. I don't want to make things harder for you. I don't know what to do with it." I sat still, his words sinking deep into my chest. I didn't know what to say, because I was still asking myself the same questions. I didn't understand what had happened between us, what it was exactly, but I couldn't deny that I had felt something too. Something I didn't know how to justify or explain, and that scared me. I wanted to hug him, to pull him close and tell him it would all be fine, that everything would go back to normal. But I couldn't be sure. I didn't want to make it worse. "Noah," I said gently, "maybe what we need right now is just space to think. It's okay to feel close to someone, but it's also okay to take a step back and figure out what that closeness means." He looked down again, nodding. "Yeah, you're probably right." Then, in a move that caught me completely off guard, he leaned his head against my shoulder, just like he used to when he was little. My heart softened at the gesture. It was comforting, familiar, and yet under everything that strange edge remained, like a low hum we were both trying to ignore. I put my arm around him gently, resting my hand on his back. We sat like that for several minutes, neither of us speaking, just breathing in the silence, hoping it would untangle some of the thoughts inside us. It didn't. but it felt safe for the moment. Then, just as the quiet began to settle, there was another knock at the door. This one was firmer, more urgent. We both flinched, startled. Noah lifted his head and we exchanged a glance, like two people caught in something unspoken, suddenly interrupted. I stood, heart racing, and opened the door. It was Mark again. "Sorry to bother you," he said, looking concerned. "You seemed a bit off earlier. I just wanted to make sure everything's okay." I tried to mask my surprise and nodded quickly. "Thanks, Mark. We're fine. Just a quiet night." Mark's eyes moved past me, noticing Noah standing behind me in the hallway. Something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, maybe, or suspicion. "Well," he said slowly, "just remember I'm right next door if you need anything." "Of course," I replied, smiling politely. When I closed the door, I turned back to see Noah watching me, his gaze unreadable again. He took a slow step toward me, and my heart fluttered, just like it had earlier. But then he stopped, as if catching himself. He looked down, struggling for words. "Maybe we shouldn't push this," he said quietly. "Maybe we both need time." I nodded, my chest tightening with a mix of relief and sorrow. "You're right," I said. "Let's just give it time. No rush." We stood there for a moment, close, but with a cautious space between us, as if we were both standing on the edge of something we didn't understand, and weren't sure we wanted to. And when he turned and walked slowly back to his room, closing the door gently behind him, I was left standing in the hallway. The night was quiet again, but it wasn't the same. Something had changed between us, something that time alone might not be enough to untangle. The house was quiet again, but the silence didn't bring peace. It only reminded me how much had changed in just one evening. I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the closed door to Noah's room, trying to make sense of the feelings, still lingering in my chest. Eventually, I returned to my room and sat down on the edge of the bed. Everything that had happened played back in my mind. The closeness, the touch, the look in his eyes, and the weight of our unspoken emotions. It was all still there, just beneath the surface, waiting. What scared me wasn't just what had happened, but how natural it had felt in the moment, and how impossible it now seemed to forget. Then, softly, there was a knock at my bedroom door. My heart skipped. I already knew it was him. "Come in," I said, trying to sound calm. Noah stepped inside, his posture uncertain, hands tucked into the pockets of his hoodie. He walked over slowly and sat down beside me again. For a long moment, he said nothing. I could sense him gathering his thoughts. "Mom," he finally said, his voice low. "I don't know what to do with these feelings." I looked at him, feeling that tight, achy return. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He was a man, sitting there with real emotions, struggling with something that neither of us had prepared for. I could see the pain in his eyes, the conflict. It mirrored my own. "I don't want to hurt us," he continued, "but I can't ignore what I felt tonight." I know it sounds wrong, but it didn't feel wrong in a moment. It felt like something I didn't even know I needed. I swallowed hard. My voice trembled when I finally answered. "Noah, I don't have the answers. I've been trying to make sense of this, too. I don't think either of us meant for any of this to happen." He nodded slowly, eyes still fixed on the floor. "I think maybe we've been each other's whole world for so long. I said that it's made things more complicated than they should be. That kind of closeness, it can confuse you, especially when life feels uncertain." He didn't reply, but he reached over and gently took my hand. I let him. It didn't feel wrong, just deeply emotional. We sat like that for a while, connected through the silence, as if our hands were saying what our voices couldn't. Then suddenly, there was another knock at the front door. We both startled again, almost as if reality kept stepping in to remind us that the world was still moving, still watching. I stood, brushing my hair back, and walked to the door. This time I wasn't surprised to see Mark again. He looked concerned, like someone who had seen just enough to suspect something wasn't quite right. "Hey, Rachel," he said gently. "I didn't mean to bother you again. I just wanted to make sure everything really is okay." I glanced back and saw Noah standing down the hallway. His expression was unreadable again, calm on the outside, but I knew there was more beneath it. I turned back to Mark, offering a polite smile. "We're okay, really," I said. "Thanks for checking." Mark looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead he nodded and stepped away, leaving us to the silence once more. When I closed the door and turned back around, Noah was still there, unmoving. He stepped toward me slowly, stopping just a foot away. "I think you were right," he said quietly. "We shouldn't rush anything, but I just needed you to know what I felt, even if we never talk about it again." My chest tightened, but I managed to nod. "Thank you for being honest. That means a lot." We stood close again, but this time there was a respectful distance, like we were both trying to protect something fragile. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't closure. It was just space, room to breathe, to think, to let things settle. He took a step back and looked into my eyes one last time that night. "Good night, Mom." "Good night, Noah," I replied softly. He turned and walked to his room, the door clicking shut behind him, and I stood there in the quiet hallway, knowing that this wasn't the end, but maybe for now it was enough. We would figure this out slowly, carefully, together. Thank you for listening to this episode's story. Don't forget to subscribe and check out more content to discover the many fascinating shades of life.